The nature of monkey was irrepressible.
Hello lovelies, today we're going to take a look at a supplement for the G.I. Joe role-playing game, which I liked enough to buy at least a few supplements for. This one is Factions and Actions Volume 2 Intercontinental Adventures, and it covers the Arashikage ninjas, the Dreadnoks, and slightly weirdly the Oktober Guard. Now when I ran a game of it, I rooted it more in Action Force, which was the international version of G.I. Joe with a few differences. So this would have been handy when I was running that, because this book stresses the global and international aspect, as you'd expect from the title. So we have the Arashikage ninja, who are based out of, is it ninja or ninjas? Don't know. Anyway, they're based out of Japan. The Dreadnoks, who were originally based in Australia and now in Florida, which is basically a different country to the rest of the United States. And the Oktober Guard, who are kind of intimately linked, well, not kind of, they're intimately linked to the old Soviet Union and now the Russian Federation and its allied states, which all feels a little bit weird. You may hear soaring and so on in the background. That is not Buzzsaw trying to break in and stop me doing my review. It's garden work. I will do my best to tinker with the sound, to limit it a little, and I'll put some music in the background to try and cover it up a little. The directional mic on this is actually pretty good, so hopefully we're okay. It's the first full-size book I think I've reviewed in a while. It doesn't... Everything feels slightly out of whack on my desk, but anyway, here we go. So the Arashikage are the most traditionalist of the ninja groups that you'll find in G.I. Joe lore. Their symbol is Chinese, but it's the 63rd hexagram, which means after completion, and its meaning is don't be complacent. Balance and maintaining balance takes effort. So basically it means even once you've won, stay vigilant is how you could take that to mean. Seems fitting. Folded into the Arashikage heading are G.I. Joe's Ninja Force group, which seems to have more of a sort of Bruce Lee whatever works attitude. Yeah, Quick Kick is included, when I'm not sure he would like being called a ninja if he were a real person. The Cobra Red ninjas are less about tradition and spirituality and even more focused on whatever works, including modern weapons, dishonorable tactics. Well, mind you, that's ninjas anyway. Applied violence, new techniques, weapons, poisons, much less traditionalist. So that's your sort of three main groups, and that covers the three different approaches pretty well. This all gets a little bit complicated, but you can mix and match faction membership, origin, and influence. So you might be a member of the Arashikage ninjas, or you might have been a member of the Arashikage ninjas and then moved on to something else. So you can have been an Arashikage apprentice if you want as part of your background, and then build the rest of your character how you like. You could include the origin and the influence. The influence is Arashikage graduate, and then take your role and so on top of that. Yeah, so you can mix and match to a degree with all the normal character options to create your own special blend of ninjas. As you'd expect, there's also a new commando focus, honing in on silent weapons, melee weapons, and martial arts, that sort of aspect. So that's nice if you want to play that kind of character more, which a lot of people do. You do get some profiles, some more Joes and Cobra agents, Jinx, who you might remember from the animated movie, Nunchuck, Storm Shadow. Not a lot in the way of equipment, really. You get some more melee weapons, explicit ninja weapons, and a specialist motorcycle, but that's about it. The Arashikage perks are a great grab bag of martial arts nonsense from films, etc., many of which feel a bit more like Jackie Chan moves, the ninja moves, things like dismantling people's guns mid-combat or using a jacket as a weapon, that sort of thing. It's hard for people to understand just how cool ninjas were in the 80s, but they were everywhere, and they were bigged up to a massive degree. Okay, but moving on, Dreadnoks, they're who I really wanted this book for. Here they're presented as more of an international biker militia, which I guess makes a bit more sense. Bikers do qualify as organised crime in a lot of places, so it kind of makes sense. But they're presented as a biker militia, criminal organisation and mercenary group all in one, so their loyalty is flexible, much like Destro's and his Iron Grenadiers. I never really cared that much for Zartan or Zarana or any of the other Zeds. Way too cheesy, but the rest of the characters always seemed interesting and different to many of the other G.I. Joe / Action Force sort of types. They felt like they had a bit more depth and they weren't just two-dimensional baddies. They had more to them, especially on their little intro cards and things. As with the Arashikage, you get new faction membership with its perks. Sort of Mad Max style relationship with beaten up vehicles is a nice one. You can have influence as a former or current recruit of the Dreadnoks without having to go full Dreadnok. There we go, full Dreadnok. The Dreadnok lore is a little bit less fulsome than that of the Arashikage, but I think that reflects people's interest in the different factions over time. It's a little disappointing, but we do at least get profiles for most of the ones that I recognised, especially Buzzer, who was always my favourite as a chainsaw-wielding humanities graduate. Where the Dreadnoks shine, or the Dreadnoks section shines a little bit more, is in their crazy vehicles and the additional vehicle rules that are provided to the game, including what's called ramshackle vehicles. So if you want to A-team montage that shit and put together a tank out of chicken wire and e-scooters, you kind of have the possibility to do that, and as a Dreadnok to make that actually somewhat useful. Indeed, modelling the A-team would probably work best with them as Dreadnoks, which is something to think about, I think. I could never really afford the vehicles, so they're not that exciting to me. So then we get to the Oktober Guard, and this felt weird and slightly out of place. International, yeah, but from their name all the way through them, they are so utterly tied to the Cold War and the Soviet Union and the USSR, and all of that is in the past. So their relevance is somewhat limited. It's nice to have from a completionist point of view of the lore, but if you're not running a historical campaign, it seems hard to justify their inclusion or using them, and it also feels somewhat uncomfortable with the Ukraine war ongoing. Now, I'm not suddenly saying you shouldn't use, real world aspects in what you're doing, such as, for example, in the White Wolf books, there was the whole fuss about including real world elements. I think that's fine, but I'm just noting that it feels a little bit weird. But then you might want to go all gung-ho jingoistic and have Joe's versus Oktober Guard surreptitiously up to something in eastern Ukraine. You may want to do that, and that's fine. You could probably do that in something like Twilight 2000. That would be good for a modern military sort of slightly more simulationist sort of game, even though the rules aren't suitable. But this is just so comic booky. It does feel a little bit uncomfortable, even for me. They've tried to update it, linking it to the CSTO instead of the Warsaw Pact. The CSTO is the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or whatever it is in Russian, which is made up of Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Tajikistan. And I'm guessing with the way things have gone, you could also add troops from Iran and North Korea and maybe even China now. but I don't see cheap drone piloting or the ability to be under 5 foot tall and vomit parasites on your enemy as a huge bonus or particularly compelling as character options. You get the usual package of faction traits, origins, and a new focus as a combat engineer, and that's got some broader applicability. Otherwise, along with everything else, they feel just a little bit too stereotypical, but that's an aspect of their background, I think. Like, they have resistance to cold, because, you know, it's cold in Russia, certainly cold in Siberia. You might as well give each member 5 free conscripts to send in wave attacks at the enemy if you're going to be playing into stereotypes. The character profiles are also a bit of a time capsule and include characters from outside the modern CSTO, but from places that were in the old Warsaw Pact. So aspects of this just haven't been updated, rewritten, and nothing's been done to make this make more sense. Of course, this might be a rights issue, who knows. The character equipment options and character options are great for raw power, which is another Russian stereotype, but not so much for finesse. And a lot of it feels very old-fashioned and clunky compared to the Joe's equipment and so on, which is accurate, but perhaps a little bit less fun. Imagine if all those weird propaganda weapons and things that the Russians claim to have were actually real in-game and deployed by the Oktober Guard. Then you could maybe have a little bit more fun with it. It just feels a little off when the rest seems so modern, and I guess I would have rather had the reinvented Red Shadows or something else in place of the Oktober Guard, and save the Oktober Guard for a book on, you know, slightly more odd choices. You know, you could have the really old Action Force factions and the Oktober Guard and some other alternative all put together, and that would have been fine. But here it just feels a bit out of place, and it feels slightly uncomfortable even for me. But maybe my closeness to some people in Ukraine putting me off. So yeah, anyway, the final section takes things on a much more international way, which is how I would want to play G.I. Joe anyway. I would want to play it as Action Force, as we knew it here in the UK. There's a new origin for Interpol, if you want to play a more investigative, cooperative sort of character. And there are new options for organisations, so you can build your own, if you don't fancy Cobra or Dreadnoks or Destro or any of the other sub-factions. So these are very broad categories. You've got freedom fighter, criminal organisation, criminal syndicates and mercenaries, but these are very broad strokes, so you probably need to customise them, which might be fun to create the Yakuza as a faction or the Sicilian Mafia as a faction. Handily, in the game as in life, freedom fighters could easily be flipped and double as terrorists. It's all a matter of perspective. This section could have been better and more complete, but I do like it. If a more international bent and approach to the game wasn't already your idea, then it's a good primer with a lot of decent ideas and plot seeds to help you get started learning about other cultures and militaries and elements of them. And that's one of the things that makes RPGs so great, even a tie-in for toys. Gamifying self-improvement and self-motivated education. And if you do choose a more international campaign, certainly if you read the old Action Force information cards for the characters rather than the G.I. Joe ones, you'll learn a lot, or you'll be motivated to learn a lot. So that aspect of it is super interesting. They do give us a few examples of international heroes, but to be honest, they're a little bit cringy and a little bit overly stereotypical. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say about a game and a toy line that includes Shipwreck, but here we are. Maybe it's just my relative increased amount of knowledge made these seem overly caricaturish. I don't know. They could have used this point as the opportunity to tie into some of the Action Force / G.I. Joe crossover. Like, so Quarrel was a repaint of Scarlet with slightly different equipment and so on, but appeared in a crossover comic. So you could have done some of the Action Force crossover characters like Quarrel, but I guess that would be too confusing and too lost in the weeds for some people, and there's probably all sorts of rights issues with Marvel UK, if that's even a going concern anymore, and all the rest of it. But yeah, I guess that would be a little too confusing for some. But they're there at least, and provide some inspiration. Alright, what do we think then? Style-wise, I'm going to give it a 4. It makes... I find the format a little too, I don't know, garish. But they make good use of art assets associated with the property as well as new artwork. On some of them, the contrast and vibrance means, or lack thereof, means you lose a lot of detail. I mean, that's kind of the point of camouflage and so on. But I think we have a Pakistani character here, and the camera improves it slightly, but on the page he's just a kind of blob, which is unfortunate. But the writing is accessible, like you'd want it to be. It's a little bit more ambitious than you might see in the toy line. This whole game is nostalgia bait, as is the Transformers one to a large degree, but for adults who maintain an interest, this is all a good thing. So let's say style 4. In terms of substance, the Oktober Guard don't really feel like they fit here, don't really feel like they're relevant, and do feel a bit icky. And the end section isn't big enough, which was disappointing. And the Dreadnoks weren't expanded on or gone into to the same degree as the Arashikage ninjas. I understand why, but it's still slightly disappointing considering that's what I bought the book for. You might be different. If you love ninjas, I think you'll be happy. But in terms of the Dreadnoks, slightly lacking. The Oktober Guard, weird. The international section, not big enough. But even so, I'd give it a high 3 for substance. So that's 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. That is above average. Remember, people still don't quite seem to understand how I score things. And if you're more into ninjas, or you have a lot of nostalgia for the Cold War, then we could easily bump that score to a 4 out of 5, which is very good. So there we go. Enjoy. Imagination is a deeply personal game about depression and its effects, intended to help people with invisible illnesses to broach the subject and explore it in a way in which they can have power over it. Imagination is set after the fall of mainland Britain to a strange reality breakdown. The barriers between imagination and reality, dreams and nightmares, have shattered, and strange things dreamed up by people caught in the event teem across the land. Only those whose minds are already broken can hope to cope with exploring, understanding, and combating this strangeness for the sake of the huddled refugees that sit and wait and watch from the smaller islands around the coast. A game of mental illness and art using the description system as used in Neverwhere. This game is available free, so please promote, download, host and spread as far and wide as you can. Available at post-mort.com and drive-through RPG.